Hello and very good morning and welcome to, for the last time I should say this, the football of this year, of course, the Football Digest podcast. A very good morning and welcome to my esteemed guests and company this morning. Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer of the Daily Mirror. Jeremy Cross, Chief Sports Writer of the Daily Star. And Matt Dunn, football aficionado of the Daily Express. Good to see you guys. Thanks so much indeed for joining. Nice to see you all. And honestly, what an amazing, incredible, remarkable, extraordinary, unique year 2020 has been. So we'll have a little look back upon perhaps our best and worst moments, best and worst signings and everything that's gone with an unforgettable year in the Premier League and indeed for football, really. It's been chaotic, tragic and disastrous and uplifting all at the same time, if I can put it like that. Hopefully 2021 will bring new highlights with us, but also we'll be looking at the COVID chaos and the real effect that's had, I think, particularly in the last week or so. Really, that seems to have gone on to a different level, and whether it should impact and will impact football over the coming weeks. We'll have a look back upon Liverpool and Newcastle with a bit of insight. I think it makes a change really from Newcastle fans. Let's understand what is the problem with Steve Bruce, because from outsiders looking in, if that had been Rafa Benitez last night, we would have been hailing a magnificent rearguard action. So let's get to the crux of that. And I don't mean that flippantly, Newcastle fans, before you start having a go. Bear with us on that. And that was the week that was really. Chelsea not looking so good. Arsenal, different season altogether. Totally different Mikel Arteta that I've seen on a press conference Zoom this morning already. So let's get into it, guys, really. And it's been a week of COVID chaos, hasn't it, yesterday? I mean, I was due to be at White Hart Lane yesterday to cover Tottenham Fulham. And even though I can't get my head around it, the days at the best of times at the moment, it really is Thursday, isn't it? It was supposed to be sort of Wednesday afternoon kickoff. And it never happened because of Fulham's outbreaks. And that just a couple of days later after Man City, of course, had their game called off at Everton. What do we make of it, guys? I mean, there's been talk which has now been dismissed. I think it's talk amongst the clubs rather than anything else by the Premier League, saying that there won't be a break. They're determined to carry on. Andy, should we be carrying on at this time? I mean, the news, we were talking before we came on air, weren't we? I mean, there's more than 900 deaths. It's a critical point for the country. Everyone is hoping for a brighter 2021, but are we in a moral dilemma? Should football carry on? Is there a place for football at this time? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there is probably as much as there was when it restarted, even more so. With 78% of the population now in strictest tier, the strictest lockdown measures, then the football. I think it's hugely important that it carries on, as long as, of course, the caveat is that it's safe to do so. And I think what the Premier League has, in particular, and the EFL, but the Premier League in particular, has proven since the very beginning of Project Restart is that it has got very good COVID-19 protocols that have ensured the football. What's remarkable? Yes, we've had 2 games postponed within the last week, but that's only 3 games since Project Restart. That's an enormous amount of games have gone ahead without any hitches, and there's no reason, even though we have had these 2 games postponed, to suggest that's going to change. The Premier League are very robust in saying that they still have complete confidence in the protocols, and so carry on. I was skeptical when it first restarted. I mean, I don't mind saying that. However, I've been won over, and I think it's important that the game does carry on. It does slightly. It wound me up yesterday, really, about the response to the Everton Man City cancellation and the Spurs Fulham cancellation. And Jose saying best league in the world sarcastically. For goodness sake, let's get a bit of perspective here. 2 football matches have been cancelled. We're in a stage now where a variant of this virus is essentially out of control, and we've had 2 games cancelled. I mean, okay, Spurs only got 3 hours notice. I mean, big deal in the scheme of things. Does it really matter? You know, the fact of the matter is that City and Fulham were both concerned enough to have those games, to express their doubts about those games going ahead, and that should just be taken as a given. I mean, taken as a given. I know people say, well, you know, sort of regulations. If you've got X amount of fit players, you should be playing. Well, no, that's changed now. I mean, these current figures change everything. And if you are not comfortable playing a game, then you shouldn't have to play it. It's as simple as that.
My point about yesterday was, and I guess it fits also for Monday, was that it just looks chaotic when you're inside that 3-hour window. Yeah. Safety is paramount at this point, and I think that was as relevant yesterday as it was on Monday. If you've got a swathe of case, I'm given to believe it was 6 players from Fulham, 4 members of staff. My point is that it's simple, and it stood, you know, for yesterday as it did indeed for Monday. Do you have to leave it so late? And that, I think, that damages the credibility, the look, and the integrity of the Premier League. Jeremy, is that a valid point, or you know, am I missing something there? Because I think everyone can sympathise. Please don't get me wrong with Fulham and Man City. I think the bigger point for me, from my perspective, was I don't think it was handled that well.
No, I agree. Look, both decisions were correct. Ultimately, you know, you have to be guided by the science, and football, even Premier League football, is no different to that. You shouldn't know. You sometimes look at the game and you think, crikey, it just operates in a different world to the real world. But, you know, what COVID has done is it's been a leveler for that. So, you know, it was the right decision. Everton's reaction was interesting on Monday because they put out a statement which was quite terse, really, and they clearly had a problem with it. They weren't happy. I think they weren't happy with City. They weren't happy with the Premier League over how it was announced. They were claiming that they were in the dark a bit. Now, I've spoken to City this week, and they said they were in constant dialogue with Everton throughout the day. So they're a bit bemused as to why Everton was so cheesed off about it all. Now, clearly someone's not telling the truth there, but it's all symptomatic of, like you said earlier, how it's just not a good look, is it, for a professional, one of the most professional leagues in the world of sport, to be calling off a game 3 hours before it should begin. I think it needs looking at. And, you know, on the subject of should football carry on, I sort of agree with Andy in a lot of ways, but if the figures keep going up like they are doing, I just think it's just football becomes more and more inappropriate when 1,000 people a day are losing their lives. And clearly the Premier League are paranoid about finishing the season. There's not a big window at the end of the season between that finishing and this Euro start. It's less than 3 weeks, so they've not got any wriggle room. The City are now looking at a bit of a fixture pile up. The more games that do get called off, it creates a huge problem. So I feel like we're heading back towards where we were in the middle of the year, where when football didn't handle itself very well at all. I didn't think they got so many things wrong. Let's hope they've learned from that, and they can deal with it. If it gets as bad as it did before, then they can deal with it in a much better way.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. We've got a question from a viewer, James Tan, saying, "Do you think, as fluid as the situation is and develops, isn't it better then to have a total indefinite shutdown of the league?" You know, and I'll throw that to you, Matt. What interests me is that basically, I don't think if we'd had 981 deaths in May or June, we would have restarted. So I think James puts on an interesting point there, in that basically that feeds into that. So why are we carrying on? Matt, is there a moral dilemma there? Is there a safety issue there?
I think it's more a moral dilemma than a safety issue with that small number of people congregating that you need for a Premier League match with all the protocols they have in place. I think James makes a very good point, though. Keeping the situation fluid is a lot better than just suddenly having a knee-jerk reaction to say, that's it, that's the end of the league. One of the problems is, I believe, although they never came to an arrangement about what happens on curtailment, the two options were being discussed were 66% and 75%, having thrown half the season out of the window. So if we play less than 66% of the season, we just forget all about it. and start again with next season with no relegation, no promotion, and everything we've had so far has been for nothing, which is a long way away still. The other thing that we've got to get our heads around is, why are we worried about this Euro 2020 block at the end of the season? Why don't we continue the season after Euro 2020? We're going to split the season after next around a World Cup. So instead of once again trying to cram too much football into too small space of time, at some point it may be appropriate to stop playing football because of the wider situation. In which case, let's not put ourselves against the brick wall and say, oh, we've got to squeeze all these games in. Let's say, well, let's take August and September to finish the season off properly. And then actually we're in good line to start working towards the Winter World Cup. And you can squeeze a whole season in before the next World Cup and then sort the mess out after that, because we've got a very mixed calendar coming for the next 2 years, regardless of the COVID situation. So let's common sense prevail, stop being greedy to try and get all these games in, and actually take a view of the wider picture, where if it's appropriate to stop to send the message out that things aren't normal, and if that message needs to be put out to the public, then stopping football is one way of doing that. And let's not, try and rush things in when actually there's nothing, making football go at any pace apart from football itself.
When would the players have a break, Dunny?
Well, in the same way as they would have done with a pre-season after Euro 2020. They'd have a break after that, come back for August. Instead of an August restart, it's an August recommence.
What would Jose Mourinho say if Tottenham were top of the league headed into the Euros, and then Harry Kane broke his leg in the Euros and was ruled out for the remainder of the season after the Euros?
He'd probably say, well, on balance, Harry Kane was injured when we went into lockdown, and suddenly I had him back for the end of the season. So what goes around comes around, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah, I'm sure he'd definitely say that.
I've got that take on it, but that's the reality of it. Is that, if you jump things around, different people lose. But he was a winner then because he couldn't wait for the end of the season last time. It came sooner than he thought.
Yeah, Andy, you touched on something that basically there wasn't necessarily a fixed number of players, and I think the Premier League have done that deliberately, haven't they? They've kind of kept it, sort of very a movable feast, if you like. My only thought on that was that basically, shouldn't we have one so that basically, that we know where we stand, basically, and there should be, because I think that was Everton's frustration, wasn't it? And it's funny enough, I should add actually that into Jeremy's thing, that basically, I think Spurs felt in the dark yesterday. And maybe that was the thing, because the Premier League are only talking to the clubs that want the game called off. So I think that's part of the function. Shouldn't we have greater clarity?
No, I disagree with you guys on this. I mean, really, are we really getting upset about Tottenham Hotspur complaining that they've had a game called off? 3 hours. The game was called off at 3:14, right? 3:14, the game was called off at. At 3:30, the health secretary was putting 40-odd million people into lockdown. They were closing businesses, forcing them to shut down, but their livelihoods are now going to be at stake. There was then a ticker tape saying there was 981 people had died with 51,000 cases of COVID. And we're supposed to feel sorry for Tottenham having to lounge around some hotel lounge waiting to see if the game's or not. I mean, do me a favour. I mean, honestly, I just find it unbelievable. I find it, listen, if Fulham were concerned enough to have that game called off, if Manchester City were concerned enough, you can't go on about numbers. I mean, how do they know how many? So if they have 5 positive tests, and then there's an incubation period, and other players have come into contact with them, and they don't want to take them to Everton in case there might be an infection risk there. Really. Listen, if they call a game off a minute before kickoff, I don't think it really matters in this current situation, does it? We're not talking about a normal situation. We're talking about a mutant virus that, to quote Hancock again from last Sunday, is out of control. And if a game gets called off a mere 2.5 hours before kickoff, then I'm sorry, I just do not see that as an issue. Going on to the things that Matt was mentioning, I do think what is going to be an issue is how you're going to fit all this football in. How are they going to fit this football in? Particularly if you get more cancellations, more postponements, which you probably will, is how do you fit it all in? Southgate, remember Gareth Southgate saying to all of us that, they missed an opportunity for all the governing bodies to get together and rearrange the calendar. Instead, everyone wants their competition to go ahead. The FA want the FA Cup to go ahead. Football League want the EFL Cup to carry on in their leagues. The Premier League obviously want the Premier League to finish. UEFA want the Champions League, Europa League, and the Euros to go ahead. And you look at it now and you think, well, it's just something has to give. What has to give? Goodness only knows.
Yeah, well, one thing that hopefully won't have to give, Jeremy, is the FA Cup third round, because the EFL are testing all their players and all their clubs next week. Surely we need a little bit more sort of testing generally, don't we? We need to sort of step up the protocols. That's good to hear that the EFL are doing that.
Well, this is part of the problem, isn't it? I mean, Premier League players get tested every 3 days, so they have the finances to implement those methods. The lower down the leagues you get, the less money there is. So the players are not being tested as regularly. So I think it's more as the season goes on, it's going to be more of a problem in the EFL than it will be in the Premier League. There were 7 or 8 or 9 games called off this week, weren't they, in the EFL League One in particular? So, that's... Do
you think we'll see the finish of the season for the EFL? For particularly League One, League Two, I'm thinking.
As I sit here now, probably not. Who knows? Look, we'll learn one thing this year is you can't predict a single thing, can you? But the figures are going the wrong direction. So, we've still got the Christmas numbers to come. Who knows how bad they're going to be. So, January, February are going to be long, grim months for everyone. And you can see it getting worse before it gets better. So the EFL will be vulnerable. Back to your original question, I was looking on Twitter this morning and I noticed Marine have tweeted out about their game. Obviously, is now behind closed doors. They're playing Tottenham. It's just one of the games of the century in terms of an FA Cup game, isn't it? Just imagine if Marine could beat Tottenham. Such a wonderful occasion for that club, and they're not going to have any fans there. It's such a shame. So I really feel sorry for those guys. But the issue there, obviously, is, will Tottenham pay for Marine? Who is subsidising Marine's testing for the players before they play Tottenham? How many times will they be tested before they play Tottenham? Yeah. Will Tottenham offer to pay for Marine's bill? I mean, I know Tottenham offered the same to Leyton Orient, didn't they, in the EFL Cup? Was that this season or last season?
This season.
As far as I understand, Jeremy, the FA are paying for all the tests. All the tests will be taken, but they'll only be tested once. I mean, that's the thing about this FA Cup third round is that the best weekend one of the best weekends of the year. But I guess if you are a Premier League club, you will want assurances. If you've been existing in a very strict biosecure bubble and being tested every 72 hours. And then suddenly you're going to, a club that maybe doesn't have such stringent tests. Then, I think you've probably got every right to demand that testing and to be a little concerned. That's just fact, I mean, you go into areas of the country that might have wildly different things. I think Brighton go to Newport, where the cases are sky high. So I understand. I would understand their concerns. Yes. So which is hence why all the clubs involved in the third round will be tested next week.
It's the FA's competition, so it's the FA's responsibility to make sure every game can take place in a safe environment, or at least do as much as they can to make sure everything's been put in place.
That's right. And if you think of somewhere like Marine, for example. They won't be playing any. As far as I understand, the league football will be on hold as well. But obviously, the FA. I spoke to the FA last week about it, and they said, "Listen, it's in a league competition, therefore it can go ahead." And let's hope it goes ahead. Let's hope these clubs get sufficient positive, negative tests that they can play these games, because there are some. It's one of the best third round draws I've seen for ages. Yeah. It really is. It's an absolute belter of a third round draw. So let's hope it goes ahead.
I absolutely. I love the FA Cup.
Yeah.
And
honestly,
I do. Yeah, I really do. And honestly, I think it's sensational. I mean, it's non-stop that weekend, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely. From Friday to Monday. And it's astonishing. The amount of fixtures, the amount of crazy ties, the giant killing potential is brilliant.
I mean, before this season started, I was thinking, would one solution be to drop a competition?
Yeah.
Obviously, the League Cup would be the first on everyone's list because it's regarded as the lesser tournament. Then you think, what about the FA Cup? But now you see the draw for the third round, you think this could be like one of the best.
I think it's got the potential to be the best ever. The sudden death element, of course, as well.
Yes.
Makes it think. I mean, blimey. I mean, here we are, guys, talking about kind of, should football finish, and yet the football fans, because of the moral dilemma and the safety dilemma, but the football fan within us all, and we are football fans, of course, immediately leaps out of your body and your soul, doesn't it? And say, of course, we should play on because we're getting excited about the FA Cup third round, But Matt, finally on this issue, do you think that basically we'll finish the Premier League season, shall I say? Because I share Jeremy's view that I think the League One, League Two is going to be very vulnerable, really. But should we be worried? Do you think we'll complete the season?
As it stands, the only thing stopping it is a political will to say, look, it's not proper for football to carry on. I mean, in terms of the practicalities with the bubbling, with the testing, everything, there's no reason why it should stop. It's not a threat to the wider population. People might not like it going on when other people, like you say, are struggling for more difficult circumstances. But generally, I think the Premier League will survive. Below that, I think is anybody's guess.
Absolutely. Well, listen, guys, we're going to move on to reaction to last night's game, and unfortunately, obviously, there was only one. But Liverpool against Newcastle, and we're going to kick off with Liverpool first because I do think it kind of opens up. We're in this crazy situation where if Man United beat Aston Villa tomorrow, they go joint top level on points, basically. How did that happen? But more interestingly, first perhaps let's look at Liverpool really, and it was a pretty flat game. Let's be honest here, and Liverpool couldn't for once find that extra gear. So Liverpool, Andy, I don't think I've looked at the bookies odds this morning. I don't think anyone is odds on anymore.
No, they're not.
Quite a thing, really. But is that a fair reflection? Is that a reflection of the fact that perhaps Liverpool, are looking vulnerable for the first time in a while?
Absolutely. I looked at the odds this morning as well, John, and I'm not a massive punter, but I did think actually, we'll come on to them later, I'm sure, but Manchester United at 7-1 looked a value bet. I personally think that Liverpool should be quite warm favourites. I've always said that. I think they're the best team in the league by a little distance. I thought, listen, they didn't play as well as they can do last night, but they still fashioned, 4 great chances. And if it wasn't for Cardallo, and if it wasn't for a little bit of wayward finishing from Salah and Firmino, they would have won the game. I think I would have been more concerned with their performance against West Brom than I was last night away at Newcastle. I thought they were okay last night. And I still think that they have the best squad, the best manager, the best front three. And I still think, that they will be, they should be favourites. What I would say is that they were a bit flat against West Brom. And I just think this is a more generic point. Sometimes I think it's going to be hard for teams to actually, over the whole course of a season, we're talking a full season of 38 games, start to finish. It was quite unusual when they came back from Project Restart and the motivation to finish the Championship, to finish the Premier League and to win that title was high. I do think it will be quite hard, not just for Liverpool, but for a whole load of teams, to play 38 games behind closed doors, as inevitably a teams are going to have to. And I've just noticed and look at this, I'm not just about Liverpool's game, but look at how flat really this, apart from maybe, Leeds' antics at West Brom, it was a really flat round of fixtures, wasn't it? I mean, it really was. It was literally sort of, there weren't many highlights at all. And I just think the motivation will be, not just for Liverpool, but for all of them, quite hard. And I just think for Liverpool to go again, that will be the hardest thing for Klopp to get them going again. But I certainly think they still should be favourites, and I think they'll win the league.
Yeah, Jeremy, do you see them strengthening in January, and do they need to strengthen in January to kind of kick on?
Well, I see they've lost Matip again, haven't they, for 3 weeks? So that's the last thing they need. Look, I think midfield and going forward, they're fine. They're not scoring as many goals as Klopp would like at the minute, but that's just a blip for those 3 front players. They're so good that will not last. I mean, that's just a fact. So, yeah, he will be tempted to sign a centre-back, I would imagine, because it looks like Van Dijk's not going to be seen again this season. So I would be amazed if he doesn't strengthen defensively. I mean, he's got the funds to do so. It's always hard buying the players you really want in January because obviously clubs are reluctant to let certain players go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I can't see it being a mad January transfer window for anyone, really, given the COVID situation, clubs' finances. So, but yeah, I would be amazed if he doesn't sign a defender of some description.
Yeah, I love the fact that Thiago, I know, didn't actually gave a bit of a wayward pass for once, but Thiago, when he came on yesterday, I don't know whether you saw that. The first time ever he played a careless square pass, which went to an opponent. Don't think I've ever seen it in his career before. But maybe he can give him an extra dimension. I love that player so much, really. Matt, do you see Liverpool being crowned champions at the end of it? Are they still the outstanding team for you, or do you think it'll go closer to the wire at least?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're having a really bad spell and they're top of the table. I mean, that's out, how much better they are. They'll strengthen over the end of the season from the physio room as much as from the market. Possibly they need a centre back. I don't think Jurgen Klopp will be worried too much if he hasn't, because he knows what's coming back. And he's got goals at the other end to sort of counteract that. The problem is anyone who's tried to put in a challenge to them has faltered. Spurs tried to do it, then fell off the edge. Manchester United on a good run. You wonder when that's going to stop. Chelsea started looking interesting, and then they've stuttered. Manchester City still have the strength in depth in the squad to maintain a serious, prolonged challenge, but just don't seem to be able to kick into gear properly enough yet. So at the end of it all, I think it won't be as emphatic as it was last year, but I still think it'll be Liverpool.
No mention of Everton, Dunny.
Oh, sorry, and the mighty Everton, who up until October looked like they might do it. And yeah, I mean, I think
they're still in the mix.
They're a project that let's get them in the top 4 first and see where they can go on from there.
I do think it's because of what Liverpool did last year and what teams have done maybe in recent seasons, what City did, what Chelsea in their prime did, having such long, good winning runs and setting new points totals. I think we've become a little bit skewed in how we look at it. We think, this is a mad season. It's actually, it's pretty much the norm. The points totals, that is pretty much what you would expect from a team topping the table. I mean, on average, I think we've been spoiled almost by teams absolutely wrong. Listen, so 100 points is now not going to, no one can get to 100 points, and the chances are is they're high 80s, mid 80s, high 80s will win the title. And that was the norm, so I don't think, Liverpool are allowed to lose games like they lost this year, this season quite spectacularly at Villa. They're allowed to lose or draw games. That is just the way titles have been won in the past. So I don't think we should really read too much into, this is slightly odd. Well, it's actually just it's what normally happens in football.
Yeah. Right, guys, I'm going to move on to a bit of a random subject. Obviously, also on the back of last night, of course, Newcastle. Now, look, I'll set the scene here, right? And basically, I remember a couple of years ago when around Christmas time, Newcastle. Under Rafa Benitez, battened down the hatches at St James's and said to Manchester City, the all conquering Liverpool of their time in that particular season when they were sweeping all before them, said we're going to lose, but we're basically not going to lose by that many. And basically, Rafa did indeed batten down the hatches. I think they ended up losing 1-0, and still through it all. The Toon Army never lost their appetite and their passion and their fervour for Rafa Benitez, who's still regarded, isn't he, at St James's Park as a bit of a god. So I guess I'm left wondering, as an outsider looking in, and it does feel like that. And I'm often sort of called out on social media for asking the question, and it is a question rather than a statement of fact. What's the difference here? And as soon as you start saying that, then basically, what's the difference between Steve Bruce and Rafa Benitez? You get lampooned when actually you're asking a question. So look, I've asked a couple of Newcastle fans, and one, I'm going to read out what they said. Basically, Rafa had a style of play and a plan. Even if we sat deep, everyone was well drilled and knew their role. Under Bruce, there's none of the above. And unless we manage to cobble together a goal on the break, we look clueless. And here, a much longer diatribe from a Newcastle season ticket holder. Obviously, can't go at the moment, but she said that basically Bruce always seems to blame the fans for wanting more. We are histrionic, he says. A manager who criticises the fans is not going to go down well. He did it at Villa and Sunderland too. Rafa criticised the lack of investment and ownership, never the fans. I'm not saying Bruce is the worst manager we have had, but we had hope for improvement under Rafa. Now, guys, I watched Steve Bruce on Amazon Prime yesterday, the post-match, and he went into that interview sort of, from the three presenters stroke pundits last night on the defensive straight away, because I think he knew what was coming basically, and he almost opened up with an answer which wasn't about a question which wasn't about the defeat and exit at Brentford. But do we understand, is Steve Bruce, Andy, right to be under pressure? Do you get it? Do you get where the Newcastle fans are coming from?
Yes, I do. And I mean, last week our colleague from the Northeast, Simon Baird, who watches them week in, week out, was talking about this and echoing actually some of the things that you just read out from Newcastle fans. Is that if for example, now we're not saying everyone can play football like Leeds United can play football, but if a Newcastle fans, they want to see their team with the football for a start off. Actually, which I think any fan should want. They want to see them with the football. They don't want to see them going to Brentford and capitulating like they did, which is considering their lack of trophies, their lack of really getting very far in any competition. Was a terrible result. So I understand why he's under pressure, and I've seen Newcastle several times under Steve Bruce, and they're not a particularly, when I've seen, they're not a particularly pleasant watch. Your point, though, is were they any better under Benitez? Now, again, I probably didn't see enough of them to say that. But the fans who say week in, week out, who go and see them week in, week out, and our colleagues up in the Northeast who see them week in, week out, say they were. So, I take their word for that, and I fully understand why Steve Bruce might be under pressure. I do think that they probably never agreed with his appointment in the first place for a whole variety of reasons. And as you know, if the fan base doesn't like an appointment to start with, it's very, very difficult to turn them round. Once one thing goes wrong, that's it. It's held against them. But I do understand it, and I do think that there is a danger. It is a strange situation, Newcastle, where the rest of the media, look in and say, "Oh, well, you're doing okay, Steve Bruce, doing okay. You're going to stay up, and you get the odd win here and there," and you feel as though you're made to feel as though you're patronising Newcastle fans and Newcastle, and they're saying, "Yeah, you tried coming up here and watching this week in, week out. It's not very good." Ironically, last night, even though again I would have thought they probably only had 20 or 25, I don't know, whatever. It's certainly in the 20s possession-wise percentage. It from the highlights, right? So I didn't see it live, but it felt like they had a purpose and had a plan. And I think the reaction, from what I can gather, has been positive to that particular performance last night. But they need more of it. But in answer to your question, yes, I can understand why he's under pressure, because they don't like the football they're seeing. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy, do you understand where they're coming from?
Yes and no. Look, Bruce his face didn't fit from the start, did it? So he knows. Look, he's the guy's. I think he turned 60 today. He's been in the game so long. He knew what he was walking into. He probably would have hoped to be given a chance. That's all you ask for as a manager, isn't it? I think that's unfair. He's done some good jobs at good clubs as Bruce down the years. So I think he's a good manager. So I feel a bit of sympathy for him. are his teams good to watch? Like Andy, I've not seen a lot of Newcastle this season, so it would be unfair to comment, really. But from what I've seen of them briefly, no. But he can only play with the hand he's dealt, can't he, Steve Bruce? And his hands are tied a lot of the times in the transfer market because Newcastle's problem is not the manager; it's the ownership. As we all know, for years and years, Mike Ashley has been a very controversial owner of Newcastle, very limited in his ambition. Newcastle are where they deserve to be under Ashley's ownership. That is, above the relegation zone, nowhere near Europe, somewhere, in limbo in the middle of the Premier League table. So, and this thing with Benitez, I mean, look, come on. What did he achieve at Newcastle? I mean, I know he's obviously a sexy name and he's managed some of the biggest clubs in the world, won quite a few trophies, but Newcastle are no worse off under Bruce than they were under Benitez. So, what's the point in looking back at Benitez all the time as a fan and saying, well, Steve Bruce is not Rafa Benitez? He's not. But Benitez is gone, and you've now got Steve Bruce, so you could make the most of it. That's what I would say to a Newcastle supporter.
Yeah, I must say that's the one thing I can't quite get my head around, that Bruce Benitez thing, even though it's spelt out. And I must say, the text came back and it's fulsome basically last night during the first half, which tells you about the quality value that she had time to tap out a text during the first half. But basically, the first half was that dull. But I still can't quite get my head around that. Although I have to say, I think if a club is defined by its supporters, there's no club that stands like that in the Premier League like I think the Newcastle. I mean, Newcastle, the fans is the fans are everything to that football club. Yeah. And I just think if they're not having Steve Bruce, and they're not, then it's only going to go one way. And it's impossible to see this as a long-term solution. And it's always felt a bit short-term. And, I like Steve Bruce. I think, but I think he's just not a good fit. And I just think that sort of if the fans are not having it, then...
Well, he grew up supporting Sunderland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Matt, I mean, where do you stand on the Newcastle debate?
I think it's all perception and what Newcastle fans want to believe about their club, even against some of the evidence. They want their manager to be a European Cup winner. They don't want him to be someone who's photoshopped into wedding photos. They want somebody who... Steve Bruce I've known since he was Sheffield United manager, right? First steps in management. And he's become better and better and better as a manager. And coming back to what Andy said, they want to see their team with the ball. They want to see their team passing. Do they want to see their team in the Premier League, or do they want to see them in the Championship? If they want to see all that Andy said in the Championship and then playing flowing football, they can have that. But the price for staying in the Premier League is you have to shunt aside some of your beliefs and whatever. Look at what happened to Stoke when they told Tony Pulis, the players, that they were being underestimated as players and should be allowed to play more. They plummeted through the leagues. And, and unfortunately, if you're not investing in the sort of players who can stay on the ball in the Premier League, you're not going to stay in the Premier League yourself. And that's what Steve Bruce is managing. He's doing the best to keep the club in the division with the tools that he's given, which aren't very good tools, to be honest, because Mike Ashley won't spend money on the proper players that can sit on the ball and spray passes around. And I think that's a lot to do with it. And you can take a punt and try and play more expansive football, but then you are in danger of dropping down. And if that's what Newcastle fans want, to be the big fish in the Championship and wipe teams away, then they've got the wherewithal to do that under Mike Ashley. Otherwise, they need new owners, an injection of money, and hope that their dreams of everything that they want to be can then come true, because I mean, when fans are allowed, it's a big club, it pulls in fans from everywhere, it's a religion up there with all the cliches, but until they've got something to believe in that's actually the real deal, then people like Steve Bruce are doing a masterful job just keeping them in the Premier League.
Don't go up to Newcastle anytime soon, Matt.
I was going to say just quickly as well, Matt. Interestingly, I would think Newcastle fans probably might say that two of their most enjoyable, thrilling seasons in recent times were probably seasons when they were promoted from the Championship. I would suggest under Kevin Keegan and under Benitez. I don't get this idea that Leeds aren't sacrificing any principles, and I bet you they stay in the Premier League.
Yeah, I must say Leeds is the antidote at the moment.
And that's the problem Newcastle fans. The problem Newcastle have is that there are more teams now playing a bit of football. And we saw even last season. Norwich played a bit and went down with an incredibly low amount of points. But look at them now; it's not too bad in the Championship. They'll be back up. I just think
Leeds haven't spent fortunes either.
I think this whole being paralysed by fear of going down is something that like, and I think in this day and age, it's something that they need to get over and play a bit of football. As I say, you turn up. Well, obviously you don't now at the moment, but you watch your team on TV or you turn up when you can, and sometimes you just want to see your team out of football. That is after all the point of the game.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, guys. I'm just a couple of. That was the week that was really a couple of contrasting fortunes certainly for Chelsea. I was at Stamford Bridge on when was it, on Monday? I'm trying to get my days. And then also at Brighton the following day for Arsenal. Blimey, what a contrasting fortunes right now, guys, for Frank Lampard and Mikel Arteta. Really, I guess that's a lesson in how quickly things can turn around. Should Lampard be worried, Jeremy? Sort of kind of coming to you about sort of Chelsea.
Yeah, I would be slightly worried. I mean, look, it's so hard to judge managers at the minute because the table can change so rapidly. And I mean, Chelsea are 6th now. They've had a mini slump. I think they'd lost 3 of the last 4 before they drew with Villa. But ultimately, Frank has spent 200 million quid in the summer on top class players. So, and some of those top class players just aren't performing from it at the minute, like Havertz and Werner. Which for me, that would be my biggest concern. They've struggled to settle, whether it's the English game in general or the system that Frank wants to use with them. Who knows? And they face City on Sunday. It looks like that game's going to go ahead now. So, that's going to be a tough test. And, if they lose that one, then there's going to be some questions start to be asked of Frank. But I've said this before on this show. You forget how young he is, Lampard. Yeah. You forget what a big job that is for someone of his age and lack of experience. So, I really hope he succeeds. And I think Abramovich will, he's not going to be panicking just yet. But their season promised so much not too long ago, and now you feel like it's just in danger of slipping away from them a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they and he were overhyped. I mean, without a doubt. I mean,
by me probably.
But yes, but you're not alone there, mate. I mean, they listen. He is. You forget, and you mentioned Arteta, John. And these are essentially inexperienced managers, aren't they? And they're learning on the job. Frank's learning on the job. I mean, one thing that I've noticed at Chelsea is that. I mean, listen, we all. On a personal level, we know what a great guy, Frank Lampard is. Just a brilliant guy, and I'm finding it quite, I don't know, quite uncomfortable to see how much stress he looks under. Blimey, it's a stressful job, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I see him, when the frustration after that Arsenal defeat, which he then obviously tried to rectify by praising them. After the draw, I don't know. It looks as though the pressure is so intense on him, and I'm sure it is. And I just would wish sometimes. I know it's hard for them, for the managers just to be a little bit more, relaxed. But he obviously just doesn't feel that way, does he? And you watch him. You're at games, and you watch him on the touchline, like most managers. And I just think it's a really, really tough job for him right now. I think he's finding the pressure quite high.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I hadn't actually thought about it like that, but you're right. He looks post-match.
Yes.
It's a very valid point that I hadn't thought of really, and it's.
I just think if it's possible for a manager, if it's at all possible, to be, I don't know, just to try and to have a little bit of equilibrium about you, to not be as delighted in victory. And not be quite as exasperated by defeat would be a good thing. And we know, listen, he's not alone. He's not alone. The pressure is intense on every single one of them. We just mentioned Steve Bruce, and all of them. We see how Klopp behaves when things don't go well, and things when things do go well. But I just think that Frank looks as though he feels under pressure.
Yeah. Equally, man, from the highs and lows of management, Magical Mikel is back to being Magical Mikel.
Yeah, very
two wins.
For one, thanks to COVID tests and affecting his team selection policy. I mean,
I don't know what you mean, by the way. Gosh, two players come out and the whole thing changes. Remarkable.
He's talking all week about fighters and victims, and you know, and they couldn't have looked more like victims than they did in some of those games. But suddenly they find a bit of energy, which is what they needed. Some zip. You know, Martinelli's back. Smith Rowe I really like as a player. He's there. Then you've got people coming off the bench like Willock, and they look like players that can put some verve into the side, and that's what's been missing. It's been too pedestrian. It's been too easy for some of the senior stars, and when you haven't got Aubameyang papering over those cracks by smacking goals from all corners, you know, it's just been too almost methodical, mechanical, like they're trying to play to a system, but not really knowing what the system's there to achieve. And suddenly you bring some life into it. You've got Saka, who's coming on immensely. He's pushed him further forward in recent games, so he's able to inflict his danger from where it's, you know, more potent. That's helped as well. And suddenly they look like a team that's going somewhere. And that's the point: is they're going somewhere. They're young players. They've got a future ahead of them, one that he can bring with him. And it's funny enough, the same happened at Spurs when Pochettino first arrived. People forget he nearly got the sack. But in the first season, it didn't start well for him. It was only when he got rid of the driftwood that he'd been lumbered with from previous managers and brought through players like Dyer, Winks, Kane, and gave them their head more. I know they'd all played beforehand. Well, Winks hadn't, but he gave them the responsibility to say, "No, you're my first team now. You go and see where you can take the team." That they had a mission and they seem to have a direction of travel. And I think Arteta needs to find the same with those younger players. And then with the quality that you can add on top of that, that's going to help bring them through. And that is a unit that can go somewhere. Whereas the sort of older players, those loanees and free signings that are just playing out their time, they're going nowhere.
No, sure, interesting. Andy, just looking at the two Manchester clubs, really. I mean, City have, you know, arguably at the game of the weekend at Chelsea on Sunday. I mean, blimey, you know, I mean, City, all of a sudden, if they win their games in hand, they're right up there, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think a few weeks ago we would have said, oh, the sort of, you know, I don't know, sort of almost drifting towards mediocrity this season, but they're not, are they?
They're not. But who would have thought we'd have said that the City's weakness is an inability, quite a chronic inability to score goals, and their strength is a fantastic defence who can't stop keeping clean sheets. You would not have made that up. But on the positive side of that, you would have to say that they do look more solid at the back. You know, John Stones is back to the form that makes him England's best centre back. And you know, if they can recapture that goal scoring form, then obviously they are an incredibly serious proposition. But you know, you do wonder where that goal scoring form is going to be is going to come from. You know, can you really see Aguero getting back into the groove? He looks quite some way short of match fitness. Jesus has obviously had his issues before the COVID. So I just think still they're still going to be scraping comparatively compared to their prolific nature of previous seasons. They're going to be struggling in front of goal. But listen, yes, they'll be there. You know, they're not. And again, one of the things that might hamper them is the fact that they're going to have a very congested fixture list with the Champions League and they're two fixtures behind in the Premier League. They're obviously in the EFL Cup next week. And the FA Cup, so that might hamper them, but they've got a big squad, they'll be there. But I mean, if you talk of Manchester clubs, I do think, you know, I saw United, I was at the King Power on Boxing Day, when they twice let a lead slip, but you know, I came away from that game, probably more than I've come away from some of their victories, thinking, you know, they are they are going to be right there. I mean, I would be very surprised if they're not taking that title race right into the last weeks with United involved. I really do.
Can they win it, Andy?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. They can win it. Listen, I saw them at Everton in the cup, and in the EFL Cup, and I picked up the team sheet. I looked at the team sheet and I thought, blimey, he's taking this seriously. This is a very strong Manchester United side. I then checked, and he made 9 changes from the team that had beaten Leeds 6-2. Only Maguire and Fernandes have kept their place. He brought in Cavani. He brought in Pogba. He brought in Donny van der Beek. He brought in Dean Henderson. Mate, they have got a serious squad. A serious squad of players. I think Cavani will be invaluable for them. I really do. I fancy them strongly. I tipped them for second place behind Liverpool this season, at the start of the season, and there's nothing that has made me change my mind.
Jeremy,
yes.
Come on. This is crazy. Man United.
Man United.
One day we're talking about Ole in crisis, and the next day we are, and rightly so, talking them as serious title challenges. It's a crazy season.
Well,
no one encapsulates that more than Man United.
No, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
I mean, they haven't been on a good run. I think they're unbeaten in 9 league games. They've obviously got to the semi-final of the EFL Cup. So I think what Solskjaer's found is he's found a backbone of a team. So De Gea's playing well again. He's had a run of games. He was brilliant the other night. You've got Maguire, who's back to his best following all his problems in the summer that we all know about, that were well documented. You've got Fernandes running the show in midfield, and you've got Rashford on sparkling form up front. So there's a good backbone there, and he's got enough strength around those players to complement them. So, yeah, I agree with Andy. I mean, look, at the start of the season, I wouldn't give them a prayer. But if they beat Villa tomorrow night, they're joint top of the league with Liverpool. It's like going back in time, Liverpool and Manchester United at the top of the table. Yeah. I still fancy Liverpool to win the title, but I think United are capable of pushing them all the way. They're high in confidence, and I think they've looked around the league this season and thought, you know what?
Yeah.
No, there's no one running away with it. I mean, Liverpool run away with it last season. City, the previous 2, they were miles behind, miles off the pace. But now there's not one team that's going to dominate this season. That's given them hope that, you know what, we've got half a chance here. And it's great to see. I mean, look, you look at the top of the table, and it's just a fantastic read, isn't it? You look, there's Liverpool. If City win the game in hand, they'll be right in it. Man U are there. Leicester, obviously, a great team to watch. Everton are hanging around with Ancelotti. So, I mean, going back to the start of the show, we were saying, will the season be finished? I really hope it does get finished one way or another, because this could be one of the most competitive championships for years and years.
Brilliant, isn't it? It's absolutely brilliant. Now, listen, if we're going to talk about Leeds, there is only one person to come to first on this, and this is Matt Dunn. I don't know whether regular viewers will know this, but Matt Dunn used to cover Leeds,
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever mentioned that before. But no, listen, Leeds, what a magnificent victory that was at West Brom. But let's be honest here, all the headlines ever since have been about Karen Carney, for her input on as a pundit on Amazon. And I must say, I really like Karen Carney as a pundit. I think she's incredibly well informed. She's got something to say, and she's got a bit of an edge. And in that bit of an edge, she obviously was quite dismissive of the way that Leeds got up and were promoted, and gave partly thanks to it, obviously, because of the COVID break, which then prompted Leeds on Twitter, their official account, to come right back at her and basically rather ridicule those comments, really. I mean, I must say, I think Karen Carney is such a good pundit and really entertaining, but haven't Leeds got a right to reply? And obviously she's had absolutely ridiculous amount of abuse, but I don't know, where do you stand, Matt? Should we automatically assume that invites that abuse and therefore leads out of order, or was it their right to reply? Where do you stand on that?
I think it's a difficult one. I think the first thing we've got to try and do, which not enough people did do, is try and work out what Karen Carney was saying, and effectively, Leeds have limped into port in the 2 previous seasons, one under Bielsa, one before that. And if they'd picked up the 10 points that they got in the previous 2 seasons from their last 9 games, they'd have finished just behind Brentford. So that's the background to it all. If you do that simple sum, whether Brentford would have recovered from they'd hit the wall going into COVID, so they might not have bounced back either. There's all those ifs and buts. But it is a valid point, and it's a point that she made. And the first thing that went wrong was that people just dismissed what she said as some very... it was disrespectful to the lead statements, Adrizani's statement said, and unjustified. Well, actually, no, it's neither of those things. It was a considered point. You may agree with it, you may not. And that's where the debate should start. I don't think it helps the fact that, being overprotective of her views because she's a female pundit is also something that we should be careful not to do. She stands level with anyone else who's speaking. And like, as John said, I think some of the points she makes are very well researched, very pertinent, and up there for judgment with all punditry. So I think there's a danger of being overly, you can't do that. And it becomes then, the vitriol pours on. But a lot of it was anti-feminist vitriol that was being poured, almost like she couldn't have a point because she was a woman. And that's just ludicrous. Let's judge her views on what they are. And I think a club's right to respond to that. I was back, I'll do a Bradford story now instead of a Leeds one. I've been in the club programme described as a small-minded, egotistical little man back in...
Wrong on a lot of levels there.
Well, I was going to say Jeffrey Richmond's about the only one who called me little. But,
you didn't sue him, though, did you, Dunny?
I had the temerity to describe Benito Carboni as a poor signing. But
the thing is, all these years later, at least you haven't sort of clung on to those words and can remember every word.
It was only 2 decades ago. But no, we've all over our careers had criticism of the club directly or indirectly. And I think the club's...
That's the point, isn't it? That I don't think there's too much wrong with that. And that was my point. I don't think that that's necessarily an open invitation for the abuse that she got. I don't know that we should be criticising Leeds for that. I think we should be criticising kind of the idiots.
Yes. Well, the problem is, Crossy, the problem is when you, from an official club account, put a tweet out like that, which is clearly divisive, we all know what Twitter's like. It's an open platform for people to abuse other people. And Radrizani, the owner of Leeds, must realise that. So, I just think it's a bad look. I just don't. Why Leeds? So a pundit has something critical to say about Leeds. So what? People hammer Man United every week. They don't respond like that. They just turn a blind eye to it. Leeds won 5-0 at West Brom, one of the best performances of the season, and the rest of the week, because of Radrizani's decision, has been dominated by lurid headlines about how they've provoked this attack on Karen Carney, and I just think it should be above all that. Really, come on.
Exactly. Listen, these are official club accounts. This isn't some sort of banter site. And Jeremy's absolutely spot on. We should have been talking about, I don't know, Rafinha's brilliant goal, or Alioski's, wonderful strike. We should have been talking about how they just attacking wave after wave. Instead, we're talking about this. When they put that out, you cannot say to me they didn't realise the implications of what they were putting out there when they put out that tweet and the ramifications. And sure enough, it happened. They just have to show a bit more responsibility.
Yeah, no, I must say it is an interesting one. I don't know whether she's subsequently been invited to Thor Park training ground
to do something before the cup game, isn't it? Yeah,
to do something before the cup game, and be interesting to see whether she takes them up on that. But
listen,
I actually think when we talk about pundits of the year and so on, I think she's right up there. By the way, so it's I just think it's rather.
What I would say very quickly is that I'm sure if she. We've all done, work on television and stuff. And you do know that if you're speaking for that long, sometimes things don't come out quite as you probably want them to. And I'm sure in this particular instance, if she had it the time over again, the exact phraseology wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't say, well, Leeds got promoted because of COVID. And when that clearly, is open to willful misinterpretation.
Like Matt, I could see the point that she was making.
Yes, I know, but the phraseology, if you play that clip in isolation, like unfortunately Leeds United's official Twitter account decided to do, it doesn't sound, clearly Leeds were the best team in the Championship last season by some distance. So basically they got promoted. The reason Leeds got promoted to the Premier League is because they were the best team in the Championship, and that really is the bottom line. So what I'm saying is, she probably would, on reflection, think, well, I maybe should have couched it differently, and say, well, actually, the break came maybe perversely at a good time for them, etc., etc. But but there's still no excuse for what Leeds then did.
Leeds are perfectly entitled to disagree with her opinion. But just disagree with it in a better way, a classier way than that.
Yeah. No, I take that point on board. Listen, I just think that, for what it's worth, I think that I'd far rather listen to Karen Carney giving a view rather than the tired old blooming former player, one from each club, sat in a studio, really not saying anything at all, not really doing too much research. And I just think, she's in direct contrast in that. And I just think the fact that basically we're still talking about a couple of days later is actually, if it weren't for this, then I think it would have been a really good debate. And you say, well, it's given us something to talk about. And I'd far rather have something to talk about because there's an opinion there, which we're crying out for, which is a great, which is a good thing. Anyway, listen, I'm going to move on to highlights of the year. And I'm going to go round the virtual room, if I may, really. And I'm going to ask, perhaps for the best moment, can I ask for the best moment of the year first, Andy? To you.
I think probably on balance, we spoke about it before. I think when Marine drew Spurs out the half for next weekend's FA Cup game was just a magical moment, magical them getting through. I think though, on reflection, maybe, Jordan Henderson lifting the Premier League trophy for all what it meant. I thought the season would be, well, basically to start with, I thought it might even be null and void. I thought even when they restarted, people would be going through the motions. But to see what it meant to Liverpool and to see what ending that time without a title, and basically we've all dealt with him for a long time, and to see what it meant to the captain of Liverpool. He really is one of the guys who one of the good guys of football, and I think to see him doing that, having lifted the Champions League trophy as well previously, I just think that was probably my moment of the season.
Yeah, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll go along with Dunny there. I mean, look, it's staggering to think that they went 30 years, isn't it, without winning the title. It's just an incredible, not achievement, but when you put in perspective, they've won European Cups, to 30 years is a lifetime for some people. So yeah, it was just such a shame that the place wasn't full, because it would have been some occasion that. But yeah, I think that, and also just on a different sort of tone, but Wickham winning promotion to the Championship and Akin Fenway's reaction and what it meant to him, and he got that text, that WhatsApp message from Klopp. That was quite
brilliant.
Yeah, that was great.
In a desperately sad year. So yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, Matt.
I'm going to go same as the other guys, but different. I was at Stamford Bridge when Liverpool won the title, and it was weird in a topsy-turvy season where nothing's happened quite as it should. I was lucky enough to have a chat with Steve McManaman afterwards, who was down there. It seemed an incredible number of former Liverpool professionals there on media duty that night, I have to say. But don't
worry, they're there for every game.
Well,
hey,
but to see on the face of someone like that, who for all his illustrious career couldn't do that, for everything he did at Real Madrid, couldn't do that for the club where he made his name. It was just a remarkable night, and to realise that wait was over. It felt like it was a big sigh of relief somewhere in football, because it's wrong that a club like that should have been that long without a title, and it just seemed like the world was well, at the time it seemed like the world was getting back into shape. We were playing football again. We were on top of the disease and everything else. It didn't quite pan out that way, but no, it was certainly a moment in a very otherwise quite forgettable season for so many reasons.
Yeah, we're going to limit this to 2020. Best signing, worst signing, Andy.
Best signing. I stand to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure it was in the January transfer window of last. Bruno Fernandes for me.
Yeah,
I mean, it's to me that's unarguable to a certain extent. I don't think there's any player being more crucial to his team's upsurge and fortunes than Bruno Fernandes. And for if we're signing, I'll stick with Manchester United. As much as I like the player, I'm beginning to wonder if Van der Beek might be as ill-advised a signing as you could possibly imagine for 40 million quid. I mean, it's clear Solskjaer doesn't particularly fancy him. I don't see how he's going to get a starring role in the team. So I'll stick with United. I'll go Fernandes and Van der Beek.
Jeremy?
Yeah, Fernandes, the best signing by a country mile. 26 goals of this year for United. He's totally turned that team around. And worst signing.
25 of them penalties. No, sorry, I had.
And worst signing also, I think Van der Beek will come good, actually. I think Solskjaer will be true to his word and give him some more game time. And if he does that, he'll see what a good player he is.
Nice player.
So, Willian, Arsenal, free transfer. He's saying a lot when he didn't cost them a transfer fee, and Arsenal look like they've been ripped off. He has been a shambles, an utter shambles. He contributes nothing. And he's earning 200 odd grand a week?
I think you're being a bit harsh, Jeremy. I think he did play for 45 minutes of the opening game of the season at Fulham. To see him since.
I think it's shameful, really. I really do.
I couldn't agree more with you on the worst signing. Dreadful. Matt?
Yeah, I'll go with Willian on the worst signing. And so it's not just to be a copycat and go Bruno Fernandes as well. I think the best signing's got to be whoever put pen to paper at the All England club on the bottom of their pandemic insurance. That's got to be the best signing of everyone's.
That is left field, and that is why we love you, Matt. Yeah, very, very good.
Loves his tennis.
Number one for tennis, yeah. New Year's resolution, boys. Now, you can be for yourself, it can be for football, it can be for anything, but I want, New Year's resolution for 2021. Andy?
My mind, a general one for football is basically for managers such as, in particular, the big name celebrating managers such as Klopp and Guardiola, just to stop having a go at referees. I mean, stop. I mean, when Pep was having a go at the fourth official for holding up, I don't know however minutes of time it was the other week, ridiculous. Klopp sarcastically applauding a fourth official or an assistant referee. I can't remember which one. Just stop it. I mean, I just do think that I would hope that, because I do think normally this time of year I say, I want diving to stop, and I'm not saying it's stopped, but I think it has been limited by VAR. I'd just like dissent against referees. Listen, we want referees refereeing grassroots football when it comes back, and we need managers to give an example of not abusing officials. Yeah,
Jeremy.
I'd quite like the game just to be less selfish. I think we've learned this year at the height of the pandemic, where people were falling out in lumps, and you just thought, God, there's this myth about it's one big family, footballing family. It's absolute nonsense. So I'd like the game to learn from this year and help itself out more really next year, because they're probably going to have to, and look out for each other better.
Yeah, good.
Help each other.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I would like once and for all, so we're not talking about this throughout the whole of 2021 as well. I just want football to promise itself that it's going to get a grip of how it uses VAR.
We nearly made the final show without a mention of VAR.
That's why I want it gone. I want it when they bang out VAR or whatever. We were stuck with it, unfortunately. But let's make it work and let's do it quickly, because another year of talking about VAR would just about do it.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, and of course, we all want England to win the Euros, and we all want to see Meza playing again. Go on, John.
Oh, yeah, wouldn't it be a dream? I don't think it'll be at Arsenal, Andy. I have to say. I'm going to chuck mine one in just for the two penny. It's a little bit of an irrelevance, really, in the grand scheme of things. But I'll tell you what, it's made even more ridiculous in behind closed doors games, in behind closed doors stadiums. When a player scores, honestly, the vast majority still, I think, do it. They go and celebrate, and they celebrate by putting a finger to their mouth, over their mouth, as if to shush the crowd. Guys, there's no crowd there. I absolutely hate it anyway, because why on earth are you trying to shut someone up? Just go and celebrate the pure joy of scoring a goal. It's one of my absolute pet hates, which is made even more absolutely ridiculous in the current climate, because there is no crowd there to shush. Honestly, go and celebrate a wonderful moment of scoring a goal, because football should bring us joy. And honestly, it sounds a bit cliche and a bit hackneyed now, but basically it has hopefully brought us all joy, isn't it, in 2020, in this weird year, and hopefully continue to do so in 2021. So guys, on that note, I'm going to wrap up there and say thanks so much for joining us. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. We've had some good laughs and some good fun doing this new show in the past year, and I hope we'll continue to do so in 2021 with always lots to talk about. And honestly, thanks so much for everyone to tune in and watch, and wish you all a very, very happy new year and a very successful and healthy and first and foremost safe one as well for 2021. So guys, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Andy, thank you. Jeremy, Matt, really appreciate it. Nice to see you all, and thanks so much for watching. We'll be back same place, same time, different year next week. Thanks again for joining.